This week's blog post is Did Alexander and Angelica Have an Affair? Part 3 of 6. For the background of this post, including the distinction between certain, probable, and possible, see the first post in this series. Working through the evidence that the affair was possible. Last week we looked at 2 letters to Kitty Livingston from 1777 that have been interpreted as showing that Alexander Hamilton was promiscuous. This week we're looking at an anecdote that has also been used to suggest that he was promiscuous. This is the tomcat story. The tomcat story appears in the journal of Captain Smith, or Smythe, I'm not sure which, a British officer, on January the 1st, 1780. He wrote this in New York City, which the British had been occupying since 1776. Smith's journal entry reads in part, quote, Mrs. Washington has a mottled tomcat, which she calls in a complimentary way Hamilton, with 13 yellow rings around its tail, and his flaunting it suggested to the Congress the adoption of the same number of stripes for the rebel flag. End of quote. Michael Newton did a brilliant job debunking the tomcat story back in 2018. There's a link to that in the blog post on my website. Michael makes 2 main points, which I'm summarizing below. First, the quote comes from a journal entry that's full of completely fictitious comments on how much Americans love the number 13. For example, quoting, Mr. Washington has 13 toes on his feet, the extra ones having grown since the Declaration of Independence. And a well-organized rebel household has 13 children, all of whom expect to be generals and members of the high and mighty Congress of the 13 United States when they attain 13 years. End of quote. Given the context, Smith is obviously not giving a factual narrative. It's quite possible Mrs. Washington didn't even have a cat, never mind one named Hamilton. Smith also got his chronology wrong. The rebel flag, with its 13 stripes, was adopted in December 1775, at which time George and Martha Washington had not yet met Alexander Hamilton. The second point Michael Newton makes, and it's even more telling than the fact that Smith is making things up, is that in the 18th century, tomcat simply referred to a male cat. The earliest known use of tomcat to mean a sexually promiscuous man dates to 1927. So in 1780, when Smith mentioned a tomcat named Hamilton, he was not making suggestive remarks about Hamilton's sex life. My take on Smith is that he was an educated officer on duty in a provincial town. He was bored out of his mind on a holiday, and he amused himself by making up stories to belittle the enemy. Next week we will look at another anecdote that is often cited to prove Alexander and Angelica were having an affair, and even being blatant about it. The footnotes for this video are in the blog post on my website. That's the one at the top. You can look up my books on Hamilton, including the one on the Reynolds affair, on my website, and there's also a tag that will take you to all my blog posts on Hamilton. DianeDuranteWriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, architecture, and my other obsessions, including Hamilton. To join the Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's on the screen or email me. And you can say, well done, Diane, or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDuranteWriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.